Introduction. The pattern nobody talks about. There is something nobody tells you about giving up. It does not feel like giving up when it happens. It feels like being realistic. It feels like being honest with yourself about what is and is not possible. It feels like maturity, like the wisdom to stop pouring energy into something that clearly is not working. That is the trick of it. Quitting disguises itself as clarity. And so you stop, not with shame, not with drama, but with a quiet internal nod, a reasonable sounding explanation, and a plan to try something else eventually. Eventually, of course, never quite arrives. If you are listening to this, there is a reasonable chance that you have given up on something, maybe more than one something, that mattered to you. A project, a habit, a version of your life you were building toward. And if you are honest, you probably gave up not because it was impossible, but because it got hard, and hard felt like a sign. This book is about that pattern. Not the single act of quitting something that genuinely is not right for you. That is sometimes the correct move. This book is about the repeating loop. Start, build momentum, hit resistance, slow down, find reasons, stop. Then start again somewhere else, with the same result. The loop has a logic to it. It is not random, and it is not evidence that you are fundamentally incapable. It is a set of beliefs, habits of thought, and avoidance patterns that were probably learned in response to something real. Understanding them does not instantly break the loop, but it is the only thing that eventually does. This is a book about understanding the loop clearly enough to interrupt it. And then, more importantly, about building the kind of internal conditions where follow-through becomes not a feat of willpower, but a natural consequence of how you operate. Chapter 1. What giving up really is. When most people talk about giving up, they picture a dramatic moment. A person throwing down their tools, walking away, declaring themselves done. The reality is far quieter and far more insidious than that. Real quitting usually looks like a gradually lengthening gap. The project that you will get back to next week. The habit you will restart after the holiday. The plan that is still technically alive because you have not formally canceled it. You have just not touched it in 4 months. This is passive quitting, and it is far more common than the dramatic kind. Passive quitting lets you preserve the story that you have not given up. The goal is still there, in principle. You are just taking a break. You are just waiting for the right time. You are just regrouping. The distinction matters because passive quitting is much harder to confront. If you announce that you are quitting, someone might push back, ask questions, help you find a way through. But if you simply drift, if the gap between sessions grows from days to weeks to months, nobody notices, and neither, quite, do you. Understanding what giving up actually is requires being honest about the difference between a strategic pause and a slow exit. A strategic pause has a clear reason, a defined endpoint, and an intention you actually act on. A slow exit has none of these things. It just has the feeling of being too tired to start again right now. The first step in changing the pattern is seeing it clearly. Not judging it, not catastrophizing it, but calling it what it is. The goal is not to feel bad about having stopped. The goal is to understand that you stopped, understand roughly why, and create the conditions for a different outcome next time. Chapter 2. The Resistance Threshold. Every worthwhile endeavor has what you might call a resistance threshold, a point at which the initial energy wears off, the novelty fades, and what is left is the actual work, stripped of its excitement. Before the resistance threshold, progress feels natural. You are learning quickly, seeing results, feeling capable. The work is engaging because it is new. Energy is high because everything feels possible. After the resistance threshold, the work looks different. Progress slows. The beginner's advantage of fast early gains gives way to the harder work of marginal improvement. The gap between where you were and where you want to be is suddenly visible in a way it was not before. And the question that emerges is, do I actually want this, or did I just want the idea of it? Most people hit the resistance threshold and interpret it as a signal. Not a signal to push through, but a signal that something is wrong. That they have chosen the wrong path, or that they are not suited to this, or that they should have started differently. The resistance itself becomes evidence of mismatch. This interpretation is almost always incorrect. Resistance is not a sign that you have chosen the wrong thing. It is a feature of every meaningful thing. The work that matters is always the work that gets hard. Easy things are easy precisely because they do not require you to grow. The practical skill here is learning to recognize the resistance threshold as a landmark, not a verdict. When you feel the pull to stop, ask not whether the goal is wrong, but whether you are at the threshold. The threshold is where most people leave. Getting through it even once is transformative, because you learn that the other side exists. Chapter 3. The stories we tell about why. One of the most sophisticated tools in the human mind is the capacity for justification. We are extraordinarily good at constructing explanations for why what we did was reasonable, and this capacity works just as fluently in service of giving up as in service of anything else. The stories we tell about why we stopped have a characteristic texture. They are specific enough to feel personal but vague enough to avoid scrutiny. They reference genuine obstacles, time, money, circumstances, competing demands, in ways that make the conclusion seem inevitable. The timing was not right. I did not have the support I needed. Something came up. I realized it was not actually what I wanted. I needed to prioritize other things. None of these are fabrications. The timing probably was difficult. Something probably did come up. The story is not a lie. It is a selective account of reality, structured to lead to a particular conclusion. The structure makes the stopping feel not just acceptable, but wise. The useful question is not whether the story is true. It is whether the story would have the same conclusion if you were feeling confident, energized, and certain that success was possible. In most cases, the answer is no. The same circumstances would look like manageable obstacles, not terminal barriers. Your reasons for stopping are real. And your reasons for stopping are often also self-serving. Both things can be true simultaneously. The goal is not to demolish your reasons, it is to see them clearly enough to know which part is honest and which part is protective. Chapter 4. Fear wearing a practical hat. Underneath most of the reasons people stop, if you trace them carefully, you find fear. Not dramatic fear, not the pounding heart, wide-eyed kind. The ordinary, quiet kind that dresses itself in practical concerns and sensible observations. Fear of failure is the most obvious. If you try and fail, you will know something you currently do not know, that you gave it your full effort and it was not enough. Stopping before that point keeps the uncertainty intact. You still might have succeeded, if only you had not stopped. But fear of success is equally common and less often named. Success would require you to maintain something, to be seen as capable, to live up to new expectations. It would change things in ways you cannot fully predict. Staying stuck is uncomfortable, but it is familiar. Familiar and uncomfortable is often preferred to unfamiliar and uncertain, even when the unfamiliar thing is better. There is also fear of visibility. When you pursue something seriously, you become visible in a new way. People know you are trying. They can watch you struggle. They can see if you fail. Not trying, or stopping quietly, keeps you in the safety of low stakes. Nobody can judge what you did not do. Recognizing the fear does not mean you have to feel courageous before you continue. Courage and fear are not opposites. Courage is continuing while the fear is present. The goal is not to eliminate the fear, it is to stop mistaking it for good reason. Chapter 5. The Identity Trap. One of the deepest reasons people repeat the giving up pattern has nothing to do with circumstances or willpower. It has to do with identity, with the story they carry about who they are and what kind of person they become when they pursue things consistently. If your self-concept includes the belief that you are someone who starts things but does not finish them, then finishing things becomes a threat to identity rather than an aspiration. Every time you get close to following through, something subtly pushes back, a restlessness, a new interest, a sudden sense that this is not quite right. This is not conscious self-sabotage. It is the identity doing what identities do, defending themselves. Identities are constructed from repeated experiences and the interpretations we attach to them. Once established, they exert a quiet but powerful gravitational pull on behavior, steering us back toward what feels consistent with who we are. The person who has given up many times has accumulated evidence for a particular identity. Not maliciously, just through repetition. And the identity, once formed, actively selects for confirming evidence while filtering out the disconfirming kind. The way through is not to simply try harder while maintaining the same identity. It is to start building a different body of evidence, small, specific, undeniable proof that you are capable of follow through. Tiny completions matter because they begin to shift the evidence base. Over time, the identity adjusts to reflect what you actually do, not what you have done in the past. Chapter 6. The Motivation Myth. Most people who struggle with giving up believe that the problem is motivation. If they could just feel motivated enough, excited enough, certain enough, energized enough, they would follow through. The reason they stop, they believe, is that the motivation ran out. This belief causes enormous damage because it leads people to spend enormous energy trying to generate motivation before they act. They wait for the feeling. They try to manufacture it through inspiration, vision boards, accountability partners, and high-energy environments. Sometimes this works briefly. Mostly it does not, because motivation is fundamentally a byproduct of action, not a precondition of it. Motivation follows engagement, not the other way around. You do not feel like writing until you are writing. You do not feel like exercising until you are exercising. The first minutes of almost any meaningful activity are the hardest, because the motivation to continue has not yet been generated by doing the thing. People who follow through consistently do not follow through because they feel motivated. They follow through despite not feeling motivated, and they feel motivated because they followed through. This is a critical inversion. Waiting for motivation to arrive before starting is waiting for a bus that runs on your own forward motion. The practical shift is to stop treating motivation as a fuel you need to fill up before driving. Treat it as something that accumulates while you are already moving. Start before you feel ready. Show up before you feel like it. The feeling follows the action, and the action only requires you to begin. Chapter 7. What commitment actually means. There is a common misunderstanding about commitment that quietly undermines most people's ability to follow through. The misunderstanding is this: that commitment is a feeling, and that the absence of the feeling means the absence of commitment. This is not what commitment is. Commitment is a decision that predetermines your behavior in a range of future circumstances. It is not a feeling that you maintain continuously, it is a choice you made that is still operative, even when you do not feel it. When people say they have lost commitment to something, they usually mean they have lost the emotional experience of commitment, the enthusiasm, the certainty, the sense that this is exactly what they should be doing. But commitment as a decision does not vanish when the feeling does. Only if you unmake the decision does the commitment end. This distinction changes how you relate to difficult periods. If commitment is a feeling, then not feeling committed is a problem that requires solving before you can continue. If commitment is a decision, then not feeling committed is simply a weather condition, something you can notice and act through rather than something that stops you. The practical question when you feel like stopping is not, do I still feel committed to this? It is, have I decided to stop? If the answer is no, then the original decision still stands, and the action it requires still stands with it, regardless of how you currently feel. Chapter 8. The Role of Environment. Willpower is real, but it is also finite, and it is profoundly influenced by the environment in which you are trying to use it. Most attempts to build follow-through by trying harder in an unsupportive environment fail, not because the person lacks discipline, but because the environment is quietly working against them. Environment shapes behavior in ways we rarely notice. The things you see when you walk into a room, the tools that are visible and accessible, the social norms of the people around you, the friction involved in starting versus stopping, all of these influence what you do without your awareness. If you want to follow through on something consistently, the most powerful move is often not to try harder, it is to redesign the environment so that the desired behavior requires less effort. Remove friction from the things you want to do. Add friction to the things that compete with them. Make the right choice the easy choice wherever possible. Social environment matters just as much. The people around you carry norms, implicit standards for what is normal, what is acceptable, what is ambitious, and what is foolish. If you are surrounded by people for whom giving up is the default, their norm will become gravity for you. This does not require any active effort on their part, it is simply the weight of shared culture. You cannot always change your environment, but you can always audit it. You can identify what is working against you and address it where you can. And you can seek out, even briefly, environments where follow-through is the norm, because for the duration of your time there, the norm works for you instead of against you. Chapter 9. The Art of Starting Again. One of the most underrated skills in any long-term endeavor is the ability to start again, not the first time, but after you have stopped. After the gap has appeared. After the excuses have calcified. After the discomfort of having stopped makes the idea of starting feel like confronting an accusation. Most people make starting again harder than it needs to be by insisting that the restart be meaningful. It should be a big moment. They should feel ready. They should have a new plan that addresses the reasons they stopped before. They should wait until Monday, or until the new year, or until after the current period of stress has passed. All of this is friction. None of it is necessary. The restart does not need to be momentous. It does not need to be informed by a comprehensive postmortem on why you stopped. It does not need to happen at a symbolically significant time. It needs to happen now, or as close to now as possible, in the smallest form that counts as having actually done the thing. Not a plan to do it. Not a decision to start next week. The actual thing, reduced to its minimum viable version, done today. The restart breaks the spell of the gap. The gap, once closed, is just a gap, not a permanent condition. The identity of someone who stopped doing something shifts, slightly but genuinely, the moment they start doing it again. The gap's power is in its continuity. Ending it, even in a small way, ends its hold. Chapter 10. Following through as a practice. Follow-through is not a trait some people have and others lack. It is a practice, something built through repeated small acts of doing what you said you would do, in circumstances that made not doing it feel reasonable. The practice begins with making smaller commitments. Most people undermine their own follow-through by committing to things at a scale that makes them fragile. They commit to an hour a day, every day, no exceptions. And when one exception appears, because one always does, the commitment cracks, the story about failure kicks in, and the stopping begins. A commitment you can keep even on your worst day is more valuable than a commitment that requires your best. Not because low expectations are good, but because the unbroken chain of actual follow-through builds more than the occasional heroic session followed by a long gap. The practice also involves learning to distinguish between stopping to rest and stopping to quit. Rest is necessary and planned. Quitting is unplanned, reactive, and disguised as rest. The person who can recognize the difference, honestly, without self-flattery, has an enormous advantage over the person who cannot. Over time, the practice of follow-through changes who you are, not because you successfully suppressed the impulse to stop, but because you built enough evidence, through enough repetitions, that you are someone who continues. That evidence is real. It accumulates. And eventually it becomes the ground from which you operate, rather than something you have to fight for. Conclusion. The next time you feel like stopping. The next time you feel like stopping, and you will, the most useful thing you can do is pause before the decision becomes final. Not to argue yourself out of it. Not to manufacture motivation you do not feel. Just to pause long enough to ask which part of what you are feeling is signal and which part is noise. Which part is genuinely telling you something useful, and which part is the familiar pull of a loop you have been in before. The pattern can change. It changes not through a single decision, but through a series of small ones. The choice to start again, the choice to stay 1 hour longer than you felt like staying, the choice to do the minimum on the day you have nothing left. None of these are glamorous. None of them will feel significant in the moment. But they add up, not just in the work produced, but in the person produced. The person who knows, from accumulated experience, that they can continue past the point where they usually stop. That knowledge is not something you can be given. It can only be earned. And the first earning of it begins the next time you feel like stopping, and choose, just this once, to keep going instead. Key takeaways. Giving up rarely happens dramatically. It usually happens as a gradual drift, the gap between sessions lengthening until the goal quietly expires. Resistance is not a signal that something is wrong. It is a feature of everything meaningful. The resistance threshold is where most people leave, and where most of the value lives. The reasons we give for stopping are real and also often self-serving. The same circumstances look very different when confidence is high. The story structures the conclusion. Underneath most practical reasons lies some form of fear. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of visibility. Recognizing the fear does not require you to feel fearless before continuing. Motivation follows action, it does not precede it. Waiting for motivation to arrive before starting is the single most reliable way to never start. Commitment is a decision, not a feeling. When the feeling fades, the decision remains, unless you deliberately unmake it. Environment shapes behavior quietly and powerfully. Redesigning your environment reduces the willpower required to follow through. The restart does not need to be meaningful. It needs to happen now, in the smallest form that counts. The gap's power is in its continuity. Breaking it breaks the spell. Follow through is a practice built through repetition. The goal is not a single heroic session. It is enough small completions to change what you believe about yourself. A note at the end. This book did not promise to make quitting impossible. Sometimes stopping is the correct answer. Some things should be stopped. Some paths genuinely are not right. The ability to walk away from what is not serving you is a skill, not a failure. What this book asked is that you stop, when you do stop, with honesty. Not the comfortable kind of honesty that constructs airtight reasons for leaving. The harder kind. The willingness to look at what stopped you and name it accurately, even when what it looks like is fear wearing a practical hat. Most things worth doing will ask more of you than you expected. They will get hard at a point where hard feels like a sign. They will require you to continue when continuing feels unreasonable. This is not a bug in the process, it is the process. The next time you feel the pull to stop, remember, you have felt this before, in other places, and you stopped then. You do not have to stop this time. Not because it is not hard, but because hard is not, by itself, a reason.